welcome to Peculiar Occurrences. I am your host, Lilith Nova. I'm sure everyone can remember hearing a story or two about someone going missing in a national park near them. What if I told you that more than one of these cases, actually dozens, hundreds of these cases, have very eerie similarities that would cause one to believe there might be a little more to this than meets the eye? A best-selling author named David Paulides seems to think there is so much more to this than meets the eye. So much so that he's written at least 6 books on the subject, which I will try to remember to list the names of in the description box below. The series itself is called Missing 411, as well this occurrence of people going missing under similar circumstances with similar side effects to the case has also been dubbed Missing 411. David Paulides is a cryptozoologist, investigator, and he also spent time on the police force, I believe over 10 years in fact, which has come in very handy in his search for these missing people and exactly what is going on in these cases. On the surface, the similarities are definitely odd, more than odd, really. But once you dive deep into them, it's hard not to believe David's theory here. I think he put it best when he said it's like reviewing the same case over and over again with slight differences. David Paulides seeked out the case files of hundreds of thousands of cases, and he has done personal interviews with family, friends, investigators on all kinds of missing people cases. This guy is no joke. He does his research. He found many odd similarities in each case, but they mostly go as followed. Number 1. Strange occurrences with the search and rescue dogs. These dogs wouldn't be able to pick up a scent. As a matter of fact, most of the time they would just go onto the scene, walk around in circles, and just lay down. Or the ones they could get going would walk partway up the path, stop, and not move anymore. Or they'd just lay down again. Like there was absolutely no scent for them to pick up. David explains that he's worked directly with these dogs in his time on the police force, and these dogs live for this type of thing. This kind of behavior in a dog is very unusual. As well, any dogs associated with the case, like the owner's dog, if it's found or whatever, it also is reported to be acting very strange at the time that it was found, or at a time prior to the disappearance of the owner or owner's child. If you look at the map, most of the clusters also occur in or around water, near ocean shores or places with huge rivers or lakes. A lot of bodies were found in, around, or near a body of water or even a swamp. Yet, throughout the heart of the country, all the way down the middle, there's nothing. And David Paulides, and I really do too, find this very, very strange because these parts of the United States, though yes, it is flatlands, it can be very harsh. David has also noticed that these people seem to disappear in a place where there are a lot of berries, especially huckleberries for some reason. Watch out, Tennesseans. Number 4, clothing. There's always a strange occurrence with the victim's clothing. Most of the times the victims, if they're found naked. And the clothing is usually stripped from their bodies. Always the shoes. The shoes are almost always gone, even if the clothing's not. The strange thing is, a lot of times the clothing and shoes are found sitting neatly together or even folded, not thrown around like one would imagine. And they're oftentimes found very close to the site of disappearance, which means there wasn't enough time for hypothermia to set in and for these people to start stripping their own clothes off yet. 5. More often than not, though, these people will search 10 miles or more, and they won't find a thing, not a single sign of the victim, not a footprint, not a matchstick, nothing. And that's very strange because most of these searches are so thorough, they will find every little matchstick or cigarette butt in the forest. Number 6. Rescuers would literally walk the same path every single day, searching for 20 miles. Hundreds of them, literally 5 feet away from each other, walking through the woods every single day for months at a time, weeks at a time. And then suddenly, while you're going down the path you walked yesterday, a tree's fallen down in front of you where it was not at yesterday, and you'll see the victim laying naked right on the tree, or across the pathway, or something of that nature. They may even search a house like 3 or 4 times, and then all of a sudden, somebody that has nothing to do with the search will end up coming across the body in the house that has been searched. Usually vacant houses. But yes, this actually comes as an example that actually comes from an actual case. Number 7. Many of these disappearances end up happening either during or right before a major weather event, some sort of major storm, rainstorm, snowstorm, something. They usually end up storming either during the time that the person has disappeared or is thought to have disappeared, or within literally a few hours to like a full day, inadvertently washing away most evidence. In North America, there are about 58 clusters that all have these associated elements associated with their case. After recording this, I found out that in later books, David states that this is a worldwide occurrence. His later books are actually about disappearances that happen all over the world. This affects people on all intellectual levels as well, going from people on an autistic scale from low to high spectrum, even up to brilliant scientists or doctors have gone missing. It seems to affect anyone, no matter who you are. Although the very few that have still been found alive have a few strange things in common. If they are found, most of the time they are found unconscious and face down. Oftentimes these people are found missing all or part of their clothing, as I stated previously. Most of the people that's found still alive have some sort of disability, like autism, that causes them to be non-verbal. As a mother of a non-verbal child, this is one of the things that really sucked me into this and made me want to look more into it. Those who can speak that are found usually can't remember what happened to them or how they disappeared. Other times they end up telling really strange stories that would seem like something supernatural happened to them or hallucinations. Interviews from David Paulides can be found online. Hours and hours of him going into different case files that he has uncovered. The more you watch, the more strange things unfold. Like the fact that there has been in all 6 helicopters in North America that has been somehow mysteriously destroyed while searching for these missing 411 people, as well as stories of, at times, the military stepping in and clearing out all of the park rangers, taking over the search for weeks at a time and just leaving without a word to what they may or may not have found. Then there's also resistance to hand over some of the files to these cases, which in all actuality is supposed to be illegal through the Freedom of Information Act. But to this day, there are some files David has not been able to gain access to. This is all very strange, to say the least, and really makes me want to delve deeper into more of these stories, and honestly, I have. I have literally sat here and watched hours and hours and hours of interviews from this man talking about the case files that he has read, and it's very peculiar, very strange, and very interesting. To give you all an idea of what this is like, I'm actually going to end this episode of Peculiar Occurrences with a clip from one of his interviews so that you can get an idea of what his books are like, what these stories are actually like, and what the interviews that you could find on him are like. This particular video really gets to me, though. I really wanted to share this particular case with you because it happens in my home state of Tennessee, and it's just all very strange. And not just that, but in this video they actually name someone that I am related to, a ranger of the park named Dwight McCarter, which happens to be a family member of mine. And I knew nothing about this case previously. This is actually a very distant family member of mine, my grandmother's sister's son, I do believe. And it just struck me that in this case they actually mentioned a family member, which tells me this is all 100% real in my head when they're mentioning people that I know and places that I know from my hometown. So I would really like to share this next interview with you all and see what maybe you would think about it. I would love to get your thoughts on all of this down below and on what you're about to see down below. What do you think about missing 411? What is happening to these kids? Could it be something extraterrestrial? Could it be wild people living up in the mountains? What exactly is this? Let me know down below what you think it is. And if you like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel and hit that little bell button so you'll know when I upload. And till next time, I'm Lilith Nova. Enjoy this clip.
Dennis Lloyd Martin. What happened to Dennis?
So of all the cases I've ever written about, this is the one that disturbs me the most, George.
Disturbs you? Okay.
June 14th, 1969, 6 years old. Dennis went with his dad, his grandfather, his 9-year-old brother into Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and they hiked into an area called Spence Field. This sits on the Appalachian Trail right on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. And the two boys were running around playing on this big field with their dad and grandpa sitting there watching. And up walks a family and says, "Hey, can our boys play together?" And you're not going to read about this anywhere, and it won't make any sense to you now, as it made no sense to me. But the family reaches down to shake hands with Mr. Martin, and they say, "Oh yeah, our last name's the Martins too." What would be those odds, George?
Pretty high, I would think, but possible.
So they said, "Yeah, could the kids run around and play together?" And they said, "Sure." Both families are sitting down in the grass. Boys are running around. They start playing a game of hide and seek. Mr. Martin is one of the sharpest men you'll ever meet. And he sees his son run behind a bush right on the edge of the field, right where the wilderness starts. And everyone's playing hide and seek, and he's watching. And everybody comes out after the end of the game, and his son doesn't come out. He walks over to the bush. His son isn't there, and he takes off on a dead run down the Appalachian Trail for 2 miles. He doesn't find him. He comes back and he tells his dad to go down and get more rangers because they need help. And they go down. This happened at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time rangers got there, it was about 5. And by 8:30, it was raining like cats and dogs. Now, as the boys were playing this game of hide and seek, 2,000 feet below them, in an area in Cades Cove called Rowans, R-O-W-A-N-S Creek, a family asks a ranger where they can go to see some bear. The ranger tells them to go up Rowans Creek about a mile and a half, and they should see some wildlife. This family, their last name is K-E-Y. It's the Key family, and it's Key for a reason. The family walked up the valley, and they report hearing an enormous, sickening scream, louder than they could ever imagine. At about the same time, their son says to the dad, "Look at Dad, there's a bear running in the bushes up there on the hill." The dad says, "No, son, I don't think that's a bear." They thought it was a man hiding behind the trees and the bushes, hiding from them. Now, this is simultaneous or just after Dennis disappeared, maybe an hour after. Now, obviously, the Key family didn't know anything about that Dennis had disappeared the hour previously, or 2 hours previously, but what they were seeing was odd. But they didn't think much about it other than it was really weird.
Right.
So they go home, And the next day on the front page of the Knoxville Times is a picture of Dennis Martin and this disappearance. And Mr. Key says, well, the time frame and the distance could make some sense. So he read in the paper that the FBI had an agent monitoring the case. So he calls the FBI and he says, hey, I'll meet you at the park. I'll show you exactly where I saw what I saw. And the agent tells him, no, myself and a National Park Service ranger will meet you outside the park at a different location, which makes no sense until you understand that the Park Service and the FBI had an agreement with Mr. Martin. In 2 months, the man never left the park. He wanted to know about everything that was happening with the search for
detail. Yeah.
Every detail. And he had an agreement that he was going to get told that. 3 days after the FBI and the Park Service meet with the Key family, a reporter for the Knoxville Times hears about it third hand from a law enforcement source and confronts the FBI, and they admit that they went to interview this person, and they admit to what they were said. So the press reporter tracks down the Key family and gets the interview, and then tells Mr. Martin, well, he goes livid. Why are you hiding this from me? And the FBI agent says, because it's irrelevant. The time frames don't matter, and it's impossible. Well, standing next to Mr. Martin at the time was one of the trackers for the Park Service, a guy named Dwight McCarter, who ended up being the head tracker for the Park Service when he retired. And an interview that we got about this story, Dwight said he knew the FBI was lying when they said it. He said, I know the area in the woods like the back of my hand. We could walk that in an hour and a half, and we could do this. So he and Mr. Martin the next day walked the path from where his son disappeared to where the people made this sighting. And they prove it could be done. So as this is going on and they're in the middle of that first week, in fly a couple of Huey helicopters filled with Green Berets.
Here they come again.
Here they come again. Now this time, McCarter tells me that it was the oddest thing he'd ever seen. The FBI, or the Green Berets, didn't want anything to do with the Park Service. They didn't want any escorts through the park who knew the park and knew the area that wanted to be searched. The Green Berets set up their own telecommunications system and tell everyone to just stay away from them. They'll search on their own. They were there for a week. Nobody knows what they found, what they were looking for other than Dennis. This is another one of those things where we file Freedom of Information Act requests. Never got anything. Now, Mr. Martin was livid because he didn't feel anybody was telling him the truth. And Dwight McCarter was the one guy he trusted because McCarter told him, this distance we could do it. They did do it. They proved the time frames worked. Obviously, the biggest clue in this disappearance is what the Key family saw. Now, Mr. Martin won't talk to the press and won't talk to law enforcement. I have tracked him down, and he lives in the same house that he lived in at the time his boy disappeared. And myself and another researcher just went cold knocked on his door. Came to the door, I explained who I was, and he said, Dave, my wife and I made a promise that we wouldn't talk about this anymore. It's ruined my life. It's ruined our family's life. Well, I explained to him that I came here from California. I guaranteed to him I knew more about this story than anybody, and would he just give me 15 minutes of his time? He looked at his wife, he closed the door, he stepped outside on the porch, and we had a conversation. And I asked him, I said, what's the one or two things that I should know about this case that isn't in the press, that nobody wants to talk about it, but what you know? He says, well, there's a couple. He says, you know that family, what they saw on the hill? I said, yeah. He said, well, the newspaper and the Park Service won't tell anybody this, but when they saw that thing on the hill, it had something on its shoulder. And nobody will talk about it.
Like it was carrying him?
Carrying his son, that's what the implication was.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, he says, Dave, do you know about the other disappearances in the park and the surrounding area? And I said, actually, I know about 12 of them. And I named them. And he says, well, do you know about the FBI monitoring those cases? And I named the FBI agent. I said, yeah, he's been on all the cases. And he says, do you know what happened to that agent? I said, no. He says he committed suicide.
Oh.
Now, I never put that in the book until I validated it from another FBI agent in Tennessee, and it's true.
What would have pushed him to that?
the million-dollar question. Now, we went up and we interviewed Dwight McCarter. And I asked Dwight, I said, so with everything you know about Dennis Martin, what do you think happened? He says, I think he got abducted. And I said, well, how come the Park Service won't talk about it? He says, that's the million-dollar question.
Now, when we hear that word abducted, David, it's got several possibilities. What was he talking about?
He thought something forcefully took Dennis Martin off that hill.
But he's not sure what that something was.
Well, now there's the interesting part of the story. Before I get there, though, when I did a Freedom of Information Act for this report, it was huge. And I went through it 6 times. And in that report, there is nothing written by the National Park Service ranger that accompanied the FBI agent to interview the Key family. There is nothing in that file about the Key family sighting. Nothing. Now, what McCarter told me is that I said, well, how could the Key family, their son, misinterpret a man for a bear? That's a hard misinterpretation.
It's a big misinterpretation.
He told me that there are a series of wild men, meaning people like you and me who live off the grid that wear animal pelts up there in the woods. And the Park Service can't control it. And he said at the time, about a year or two before Dennis disappeared, a Park Service ranger was attacked by one of these people and nearly killed because the person that attacked the ranger was armed. But at the time, the National Park Service enforcement rangers were not armed. So his feeling was that one of these wild people that lived up there took Dennis, but he goes, it's just conjecture, but I do still think he was abducted.
So let's get in. Go ahead.
One more thing I want to say about this is that when this book came out, this was the cornerstone case, and it was all backed with fact. Because I had the news article, I had the report, I had everything laid out to a key, and I had Dwight McCarter's testimony. So we held a press conference in Knoxville, and we got every major news organization, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, to come. And they asked every question under the sun. And we had displays. We laid it out perfectly. It was just about the Dennis disappearance. And do you know, all of them left except one news agency, and this one reporter said, Dave, I got to tell you, this will never make the air. I go, why is that? He goes, it just won't ever make it. The park means too much to this local community. And what it means is it means $800 million a year to the local area around the city of Knoxville and the surrounding region. And do you know, George, nothing about this ever made the press.
It's the greatest kept secret out there, I bet.
It is.
Are you listening? Damn.